My name is Brenda Reed Denson. I'm a pharmacist at Children's of Alabama. I'm going to speak to you today about drug accountability in the research arena. Our objectives for today are to examine medication documentation procedures for drug received and drug dispensed in research, including FDA and ICH requirements, to review typical components for research medication documentation, to review required documentation for medications, to evaluate special circumstances in research medication documentation. We're going to start off with a few of the CFR rules from the FDA. I'm sure that some of you have seen these as you've taken your IRB courses prior to this. 21 CFR 312.61 states that the control of the investigational drug says an investigator shall administer the drug only to subjects under the investigator's personal supervision or under the supervision of a sub-investigator responsible to the investigator. 21 CFR 812.110 indicates an investigator shall permit an investigational device to be used only with subjects under the investigator's supervision. Additionally, 21 CFR 312.62 states an investigator is required to maintain adequate records of the disposition of drug, including dates, quantity, and use by subjects. If the investigation is terminated, suspended, discontinued, or completed, the investigator shall return the unused supplies of the drug to the sponsor or otherwise provide for disposition of the unused supplies of the drug under CFR 312.59. So as you can see by the previous two slides that there are rules that the FDA states where the investigator is responsible for certain things. So ultimately, the drug disposition goes back to the responsibility of the investigator, even though there might be someone else that is managing that aspect of the study. So I'm going to go over some of the FDA GCP inspections and their drug citations specifically that were cited in 2012. There were 9% of domestic clinical sites inspected for drug accountability issues. 11% had issues in 2011 and 9% in 2010. And what I mean by this, by the citations, of the citations that were recorded, 9% had to do with drug accountability issues in 2012. Of that 9%, many were cited as significant, meaning there was noncompliance. A third of those were noncompliance issues according to the FDA. This noncompliance is only surpassed by protocol violations and record-related problems. Thus, you see the importance of appropriate drug accountability for studies. So what specifically were the drug accountability citations? One of the citations was that drug accountability logs were inconsistent with the progress notes or other study documents as to the disposition and return of the unused IP. So it was unclear to the FDA what happened to the drug that was not used by the subjects. Also, there were discrepancies between the source documents, the ECRFs, IP dispensing, meaning investigational product dispensing, and IP accountability and reconciliation of records. In other words, there was not a closed loop within that system. Another citation was just the lack of records showing proper storage. At Children's of Alabama, we have our storage requirements for the pharmacy are pretty strict. We have manual monitoring and also electronic monitoring that is continuous for temperature and other controls within the site. So proper storage documentation, mostly in regards to temperature, but also some studies require other kind of storage documentation such as humidity or the proper storage, as in control of storage, as who had access. Another one was incomplete blinding, lack of dosing information, which is huge for pediatric studies. We want to make sure that if dosing is one of the things that is being studied, we do want to show that that was evaluated somehow, and the drug accountability records provides a good place to do that. If you do not have that documentation on your record, you can also provide your own documentation for internal checks on drug dosing as a proper pediatric precaution. Subjects receiving medication kits not assigned to them. When this happens, generally it's considered a true med error in the fact that it was a process. The medication kit, just to give an example, you might have a kit that is labeled 1714 and another kit that's labeled 1719. And as we all know, 4s and 9s look a lot alike, especially if the numbers are maybe international studies and they don't do the numbering as we're accustomed to seeing in the United States or North American studies. Sometimes that can be a problem, or just being in a hurry and not noticing that the 4 was actually a 9 or the 9 was actually a 4. So it's important that you have 2 people look at those kit numbers, a pharmacist and the nurse or the coordinator providing the medication can both look at the kit numbers and make sure that those kit numbers match up, especially when you have those drug studies where the kit numbers are very similar, or you have a high volume of numbers in your system. So I want to talk a little bit about ICH guidelines because some of us do work with international studies. The ICH is International Conference on Harmonization. What this is, it's very similar to the FDA. In the United States or North America, we look at the ICH guidelines as just what they are, guidelines. And we do adopt some of them in practice. However, we do follow the FDA in the United States. If you are doing an international study, the ICH guidelines and the FDA rules are very, very similar. So countries such as those in Europe will follow the ICH similar to how we follow the FDA. So it's good to know that they exist and that they do often mesh, but we are subject in the U.S. to primarily the FDA, but we need to know about what's going on internationally as well. They do state that the responsibility of the product does rest with the investigator. We're allowed or required the investigator shall assign some or all the product accountability to a designee. The investigator should maintain records to the site, at the site, use by each subject, and return or destruction of product. Sounds familiar. Records should contain dates, quantities, lot numbers, kit or unique code identifiers, and expiration if available. That is not always available. The company will send you the notice for when the kit will expire or when the date has been extended on many supplies. And the storage should be as specified by the sponsor. So let's go back to the FDA now that you've heard about the ICH. The FDA inspectors assess accountability. Who is authorized to administer and dispense? You need to have a record of that. Was the subject authorized to receive it? Did they go through all the proper screening processes, and were they authorized to get the product? The receipt of product, the quantity, and the condition upon receipt. When a drug is received for us into the pharmacy, we have a packing slip, and we often have a temperature recording device. The temperature recording device needs to show that there were no alarms set off, and we can look at that often by looking at the temperature device itself, and sometimes we have to put that temperature device and plug it into the computer and look at a graph and make sure that there were no deviations in temperature when it was shipped to us. We also look at the product itself, that there are no broken ampules, vials, the bottles have not been tampered with, and we need to make sure that the kit numbers on the packing slip match the kit numbers that we actually received. Another accountability issue that is assessed is subject number, date and quantity dispensed, date and quantity return, storage conditions, including the documentation of those storage conditions, access to the product. You want limited access. You do not want to have the products where anybody and everybody can get to the product. You want them locked. For us in the pharmacy, we actually have badge swipe access and PIN code just to get into the room where products are stored. And then again, we have keys. And sometimes we have double keys depending on the study. So you want to provide limited access as much as you can. The product itself needs to be visually inspected, including the labeling. Sometimes there are labeling smudges, and that when there's a product that does not need to be dispensed because it's been altered in some way, that maybe the label got smudged or the bottle got broken, then you need to quarantine it and notify the sponsor. So I like to take the drug process for accountability as drug product in, drug product out, and drug product back in. Because we are going to get the product into us, we're going to give it to the patient, and then they're going to bring it back into us. So to start off, the drug process, the study drug process where the drug comes in, the drug is delivered from a company or repository to the hospital pharmacy or clinic via a courier such as UPS or FedEx, some system that can be tracked. Once received by the pharmacist, the temperature logging device must be stopped and accounted for. The contents of the package are inspected and checked with the packing list and signed and dated. Keep those packing lists. They're really important. The sponsor will look at them. The FDA will look at them. And if you have a controlled substance, the DEA wants to know that you have those as well. So next you will have your IVRS or IWRS or a fax to let the company know that drug has arrived. Next, the drug is logged into the study notebook in the master accountability log. Some master accountability logs are separated for drug strength, bottle, pack size, drug name if differing for drugs, lot number, expiration, and then active versus placebo. If I have a master list and I know which is active drug and which is placebo drug, I make sure I separate those drugs and I separate those accountability logs so as nothing gets mixed up. One of the things that I do, sometimes I will have a blue sticky note, blue highlighting for true blue active drugs, and pink for placebo. And that helps me know which goes where. It's just an extra little process in addition to having the accountability logs. Drug accountability in the master log consists of date received and amount received at the minimum. That is the minimum, but having the extra things in there that the FDA wants to see, the DEA wants to see, your sponsor wants to see, will help you later on when you can't remember, 18 months later what you did on the first dispensing. Good accountability logs contain enough information for subject dispensing and recalls. That means you have the lot number and you can track that from in to out to in. So I've talked about these temperature recording devices, and on the screen you'll just see a few. There are some that are very simple, as the one on the bottom. It's just going to give you a green check mark if everything was good once you stop the device, or a red X if there was a deviation. One device, the one to your left, you can see has the port to plug into the computer. The one on the right is the red device is something that you can keep for a very long length of time. An example would be a drug that is maybe a biological product that needs continual monitoring, a vaccine. So you want to keep that continual monitoring going. We do have continual monitoring at Children's, but this is an extra step that companies often take to make sure that they have continual monitoring, and then they can take that device and plug it into the computer when they come for monitoring visits. Another, just a drug accountability example, I provided a sheet just to show you one way you could set up a drug accountability sheet if you do not have one sent to you by the sponsor. Often studies will just let you make your own sheets. They just want to see the packing list and how it was dispensed to the patient, but if the FDA comes to inspect you, you want to have good records. It will help you out, I promise. So next we have the study drug process out. That's either we dispense it, we destroy it, or we return it. So once the drug comes into us, that's what we're going to do to it. We're going to either give it to a subject, we're going to destroy it upon the okay from the sponsor, or we're going to return it upon the okay from the sponsor, depending on what's going on, whether it's the expiration date or study closed. If you dispense to a subject, there are 3 items that need to be completed: your master drug accountability log, your subject accountability log. I suggest you do separate logs if you're going to have a pretty high enrolling study, or if you have a study that's going to enroll more than 2 patients, because you want to be able to track the drug, and if you're dispensing every 2 weeks, every month, it will be easier if you have a subject log and a master log and you just keep up with both. Medication dispense will be dated, identified with subject number or identifying digits according to the protocol. In the state of Alabama, medications for outpatient use will also contain a prescription label with minimum required data according to the state law. Date dispensed, subject number, kit number, and initials of the person dispensing needs to be recorded. Document destruction or shipment back to the company of the investigational product. The following are needed for this reconciliation: the name of the IP, the lot number, the container size, quantity, pharmacist or other PI designee. I always tell people, if you're not exactly sure what that log is asking you to put in there, Xerox your box, Xerox your bottle, and have everything you need. Even if you're recording what you think, go ahead and Xerox it, save it, and when the sponsor comes for their monitoring, they can see what you did. You'll be like, I don't know if this was supposed to be this number or this number, but I recorded it for you so you'll know that I have the numbers that are needed. Destruction on site often requires 2 signatures. And also, photocopy the log. A copy goes with the shipment and or sent with the monitor. Do not let them get your only copy. Make sure you make copies of everything. When the monitor's wanting a copy, I suggest that you're there when she's copying it, or he. Drug accountability components. This is my wish list just from all the audits and the monitoring that I've had from sponsors. I've found that this was very helpful. Drug name, quantity, lot number, expiration of drug if it's available, kit number if applicable, date received, date dispensed, date returned or destroyed. Those things are actually required. Running total balance, that'll help you. If you can keep that balance going and then you double check that. We have many studies where there are 2 pharmacists that do the inventory, and I actually do the inventory 1 time a month, and then the other pharmacist does it 3 times a month, and this helps keep a balance. If you can get someone to check your total balance every now and then, it will keep you on par. You can find errors that you may have made as a human, we all do, before it's a big problem. The drug strength and bottle package size should be at the top of the form. So, compliance is the drug in, drug out, then drug in. So count those return medications while the subject's still there if possible. So questions can be asked and answered if necessary. You can get those on your proper forms, and then they'll match up with your drug accountability. Use a pill counting tray and gloves to not touch the medication. We're working with research medications, even if it is a drug that is commercially available for another reason. There are a lot of drugs that keep getting added to the NIOSH list for hazardous medications. Protect yourself and just wear gloves when you're counting the medications. Make sure that the medication package still contains information to identify it for destruction for the sponsor. Sometimes what you get back from the subjects is really difficult to read. So if you know what it is, go ahead and mark it on use a Sharpie in a bag, put the medication in there, and get all the information you need so that 3 months from now when the sponsor comes, or 8 weeks from now, you'll be able to say, yes, I looked at this on this date and this is what they told me it was, and you'll have the information. Have a double check person to verify counts. When you have a study where there's a lot of returns, this helps. If the monitor questions your count later, you can say, I counted it with the nurse, and this is what we both independently came up with. And generally, they will take your number, and your drug accountability sheets will stay on task, and then they may have to alter something that maybe they accidentally put in the system wrong, because they're humans as well. Compliance is usually documented on subject logs. So here's some other common questions. Does an investigational drug need to be labeled with an expiration date? No. When you receive a drug that is investigational, you do not need an expiration date. The sponsor will let you know when it expires. However, when you're dispensing to a patient, they need to have something on there. The general expiration date for liquids is 6 months, and for tablets that have not been altered is 12 months. So we need to have an expiration date, especially those drugs that are reconstituted. We want to make sure that if somebody were to come behind you, that they would see, oh, this drug is expired, or we need to question it. Are there special labeling requirements regarding controlled substances used in clinical trials? Not labeling requirements, but there are special inventories that need to be made and special documents for controlled substances. What needs to be done if a product does not appear, smell, or feel normal? Well, you need to quarantine it. Do not give it to a patient. And if they have something, they need to return it, and they need to be dispensed something that is normal. If an FDA-approved medication, commercially available drug, is being studied in an open label format, does it need to be labeled for investigational use only? Yes, it does, because we're doing a study and we are using it in an investigational manner. So we may not be using it according to their labeling and packaging approved by the FDA. So we want to go ahead and let people know, if they go somewhere else, that whatever drug they're on is being used in an investigational format. In summary, I want to just encourage you to document, document, document. When you can't document everything, then make copies of everything and date it. Use a double-check system with medications. The one dispensing checks the kit number and the subject number, as well as the one administering the agent. Do self-audits to make sure that you have everything in order. Do not wait for the monitor. Ask questions if something is unclear or new. Please contact me if you have any questions. My email is on the screen, and thank you for your time.